Hello and welcome to another installment in my wedding dress making series. In the last video I tackled the beautifully and custom embroidered skirt, and now it's time to do the same for the bodice. If you haven't seen the other videos, I would recommend you start there. Alright, let's get started. I finished actually having the skirt last night, but that's a different video. Today is actually my birthday, and I started off with my traditional birthday breakfast of a piece of cake. It's a once a year thing. And today I'm going to start testing the bodice embroidery pieces that I digitized last week. I have a bodice mock-up. This is technically number 4, and this is going to be on some elastic, so it's not going to sag that far. And I've been doodling some embroidery ideas. I also have one for the back. I didn't want to go too crazy on embroidery on the bodice, so it's just going to be that, and then the hem of the skirt. And this thing. I have nothing for this yet. This is my new magnetic embroidery hoop. And I've got to say, I love it. I'm testing the embroidery with scraps of the satin with organza overlay. I went over the fabrics in the skirt video, but this organza is made from recycled water bottles. This looks pretty good, except that I have learned that hiding objects in Hatch means that they are still there, they're just not visible on the computer, so I'm gonna have to fix that. But otherwise, this looks really good. Next up was the center front embroidery test. Also, this is the result of many hours of digitizing and many scrap designs, so it's not as straightforward as it seems. This is perfect! Well, there's one little fix. I've already fixed it on the computer, so I just need to plug in the new file, and I am ready to stitch out the actual wedding bodice. I ironed both pieces of fabric this time because it is important. Should be the real one, so leaving plenty of room for seam allowance around the embroidery. This is the pattern piece, so should fit fine. I layered cutaway stabilizers, Duchess satin, and lint rolling away any dust of fibers before adding the organza. This camera did not like focusing on all white. Okay, I just need to make sure that the design is pointed this way. Do you mind? Don't even think about it. Alright, the stitching here is all done. I have a dog nose in my face. Oh, there we go. Pretty much ready to trim up the threads and cut the actual pattern piece out. But someone wants an afternoon something, but the smoke is so bad from the Canadian wildfires that we can't really go outside today, so we are going to play iFetch. I trimmed the jump threads between the embroidery. So before I give you a deep look into the embroidery on my bodice, I have to tell you, Patrick and I have had a rubber ducky war going for a very long time. It sort of petered out, but we estimate that we bought like 800 rubber duckies and hid them all over the place, pranking each other. And I tripped over one of his and almost hit my head on a table. And then I put all of like 300 of them under his sheets in his bed, not knowing that he was going to belly flop on top of them, and they all went squee at the same time. And in my personal opinion, the winning move, which was buying an 81-inch long inflatable rubber ducky and tying it to his dock, but he didn't get home until after dark, so he came downstairs in the morning and saw this monstrous rubber ducky tied to his dock. It was truly hilarious. So now that you know the context, I can show you the secret detail. Lovely flowers, embroidery, and oh my gosh, what is that? There's a rubber ducky. I crack myself up. Anyway, I am now going to cut the pattern out. Someone is grumpy that we're not going outside today, but it's not my fault, and she has gotten exercise. I placed the pattern carefully. Nope, never mind. If you've watched my skirt video, which I recommend you do first, you'll know that I have several Emmy paw prints permanently on the skirt. Wink wink. I traced the embroidery so that I could line up the back panel to be perfectly mirrored. Time to cut! You can see that I added seam allowance to the pattern, so I sliced it along that edge. I really should have basted this first. Yeah, that would have been a good idea, but it was too late, so I pinned them together instead. I marked the alignment marks with a disappearing marker. I marked the center of the center front and repeated all of those steps again. Originally this pattern was based off the L pattern by this creator, but I modified it so much that you wouldn't get the same result by using it. I really liked how the pattern fit me, so I used it as a starting point. I think I went through around 8 drafts. So I lost a needle. There's supposed to be one here with the piece of thread in it, and it's gone. I'm sure the thread just got caught on something. This is not it. This is the other one. But I don't know where it is. So that's great. I used my second favorite needle to hand baste the satin and organza at the edges. It's already attached with the embroidery, but spoiler alert, that part did not go well. Well, many things went wrong. You'll just have to keep watching. I found it. Yay. And not with my feet. I found it with my eyeballs. Yesterday, I got a much needed haircut. It's much more manageable now. And I got some beautiful flowers from my neighbors, so thank you, Wes and Joanne. Aren't they just gorgeous? Today, I am going to finish cutting out the rest of the bodice pieces and maybe baste them all together. We'll see how far I get. I only had embroidery on the front and back, not on the sides, so I cut the sides out on the straight grain, and you can see the original pattern text and some of my modifications. I needed to raise the strap points for later. I overlaid organza scraps and made sure that the grain line matched up with the satin grain lines. I hand basted these layers together and kept all of my stitches within the seam allowance. I carefully trimmed the excess organza. And in case you thought I was working on this alone, you'd be wrong! After dark, I traced the stitching lines. Time to pin! I eased around the princess seams and all the way down. To be extra careful, I hand basted along the stitching lines on all seams. This was especially important on the princess seams to make sure that there are no puckers. Look at me being all super professional, like this is gonna work out on the first try. Ha! And look, it's my old Fitbit! It had a dramatic end in this video. Also, my reception dress was just the coolest dress ever! And I have a chair companion. She demanded to be up here. I spent an awful lot of time being an excellent seamstress here. Sigh. And how am I doing? Let's just say I'm really tired, because I just stitched something the wrong way around. This is the outside, and this is the seam that's supposed to be on the inside. Oh my gosh, it's like 11 at night. I should not be sewing this late. Very true. So I undid and redid all of that and went to bed. Don't sew when tired, folks. It is just a recipe for disaster. Eventually, last night, I did manage to get the whole bodice basted together, so I just tried it on, and it fits perfectly, and now I get to stitch it. I will be using a much smaller stitch length than normal, and I'm gonna put my machine back on turtle mode, because I don't want to go fast and go crooked. Turtle mode activated and ready to go. I'm not nervous at all or anything crazy like that. Turtle mode is so very slow. Okay, maybe not quite full turtle mode. Much better. Still slow enough to be controlled though. I pulled out the basting stitches and ironed the seams flat. I had tested the heat settings on some scrap fabric because I do not want to melt this. Since there's a big curve at the waist, I ironed from each side, and the princess seams were ironed on my curved pressing hand to match, well, my curves. Okay, I think I have just enough fabric to be able to cut this out, but I can't really make any big mistakes because that's all that's going to be left over. This being the non-stretch denim strength layer. I added seam allowance and lost my scissors again. You'd think for as often as I lose them, I would keep better track of my scissors, but no, they are always disappearing. This strong lining is almost the same as the outside, except it will have boning. I put 3 channels on the center front and the side front using some twill tape. I stitched both sides of the tape down before stitching the bodice pieces together. I pressed the seam allowance open and stitched it in place for boning on the seams later. I want to finish the top and bottom edges with piping, but the cotton cord I usually use is like a rope, which ripples and shows the twisting of it, so I am instead going to rescue this cotton cord from some old piping that I don't need anymore, and embed it in this stuff. I cut 2-inch wide bias strips of satin and the organza. See, I am cutting more than nothing. I switched to my zipper foot to get the needle right up against the cord, and then things went wrong. Okay, well, what you've missed in the time that I did not feel like recording was that I tried on the bodice and it was too small. So I panicked for a while and then redid all of it, almost, including the embroidery and the center panel, of which I used the wrong stabilizer, so I have now stitched that out 4 times if you include the test piece. Yeah, so that's just great. Anyway. Emmy wanted to go for a walk, but it was actively thunderstorming, but it seems to have stopped now, so I should probably run outside before it starts up again. I still have to stitch the new pieces together. Probably won't record that either. A little frustrated. Very stressed. And so I did everything again without filming much. I was very stressed, and it was less than a month from our wedding day. So I'm here in my nice clean sewing room with dirt face. I do make a lot of very pretty things, but rarely is anything ever perfect, and I'm definitely not good at things every single time on the first try, because this bust curve here, I just unpicked it 4 times. And that's not even including the other bodice, which is over there somewhere. Anyway, it's 9:30 at night, and we're back where we started this morning. Oh, hi. You coming in? You're stepping on everything again. I'm gonna rip my pattern, but a lap dog. I'm gonna go iron again. I'm not sure how to make ironing the same thing over and over again sound interesting. Back to where I started this morning. I pinned the piping onto the outer bodice. This is one continuous strip of piping with no seams, and I snipped it and pinned around the points and down the armpits. I also put piping along the bottom edge, making sure that it sits nicely at the point. I hand basted the piping down here because the zipper foot that I use doesn't go over pins very well. And is that Rapunzel's son? Why, yes it is, and the other side is a rubber ducky. The duck thing was not about winning, it was about making each other laugh as much as possible. In fact, we both put duckies in our vows. Not that I knew that at the time because I didn't know Pat's yet, and I finished writing mine a day and a half before the wedding. Not because I'm a procrastinator, but because I wanted them to be as perfect and meaningful as I could make them. Also, Emmy loves rubber duckies. Look at the clouds. This is how most people sew, right? I mean, you gotta move to the back of the chair. I'm sorry. I folded the piping down and pinned it in place, clipping the curves to help it lay flat, and I removed all of the bulk at the points. I did a catch stitch to keep the seam allowance down, but being very careful to not go through to the front of the bodice. I'm only catching the interfacing. That would be bad, and I am already on my second bodice and running out of time. I gave it a good ironing. I've chosen a separating zipper, and I want to do a centered lapped zipper, so I'm pinning down the center back seam and sewed it with a basting stitch. A long stitch length that is easy to remove later. I ironed that seam open, but since this is also my clapper, I use my hands to hold it while cooling. Ouch. I take my separating zipper and placed it centered on that seam and pinned it in place. I basted this in by hand so that I could remove the other basting stitches and try it on for a test fit. Well, I feel very pretty right now. I am not wearing the right shoes, so it's a little too long, but I didn't really care. I'm only working on the bodice right now. This is great. This right here. A little less great, so I need to work on that, but the rest of the bodice, it fits up until the waist point, the bulges, it fits fine, and I think with boning that bulge might go away a bit. This is looking really good. Yay! I unpicked the piping on the bottom and moved it up to the purple line and reapplied the zipper. And I know you're supposed to do this while putting the red ball under the seam, but in my experience, that is a great way to slice up all your fabric, and I don't have time to redo this for a 3rd time. I redid it a couple of times, but it is good. So I guess I'm done with this for now, and do you want to go for a jet ski ride? Yep. Emmy will actually pout if she doesn't get her daily jet ski ride. I ironed the seam allowance on the lining over and clipped a tight curve so it will lay flat. I put the outside and lining together and pinned them in place, except for the strap points because I haven't made the straps. Have I mentioned those yet? Don't worry, they're coming up soon because we are rapidly approaching the deadline. There's a duck on my dock. Since I am shortening the zipper, I stitched a new zipper stop at the top by stitching around the teeth several times in an out of focus way, and stitched the rest of the tape out of the way. That's better. I'm just trying to keep the zipper pull on the zipper tape here. And now I can finish sewing in the lining. Well, almost. Okay, I have redone the boning channels like 5 times, but currently we have 2 seam ones here and 3 in the center, and I took this one out, but I still have the seam ones in the back. I already have steel boning in the corset for this, so I went with synthetic whalebone for the bodice. And now I can finish sewing in the lining. Mostly. Obviously, quality control was supervising this. Alright, I did a little bit of a mock-up on the sleeve last night, and it looks awful. It's all wrinkly and lumpy, and so I'm gonna have to rethink this one a little bit. Chicken dance! But in the meantime, this is my reception dress, and it's made from fiber optic fabric, which is the coolest fabric that I have ever worked on, and I'm really excited about it, but it's gonna be a separate video, so you're gonna have to watch that another time. The next draft was better. Obviously, this needed more embroidery. Also, it was stitched in 3 segments because it was way too big for one hoop. Did I mention that I use Hatch to digitize all of the embroidery on my dress? I carefully trimmed the excess dissolvable stabilizer before realizing that I can trim the fabric too, but not the fabric here. I rinsed the rest of the stabilizer away and let it dry. I trimmed around the embroidered edge before using a candle to seal the edges. Outside, of course. There's nothing like breathing in melting plastic water bottles. It was a little bit windy. Emmy is enjoying the sun. I tried again inside my mom's wedding dress box for some wind reduction. And yes, I said my mom's wedding dress box because if you thought that I was crazy for making 2 wedding dresses for my wedding, then you'll be shocked to learn that there's actually a 3rd one made for my mom's wedding dress. Comment if you want to see that video made because I am a little bit burnt out on wedding videos right now, but I did film it. I trimmed the armhole with some added seam allowance. I cut 1.5 inch wide strips and pinned them to the armhole of the fluffy sleeves. Flutter sleeves? The internet seems to suggest cold shoulder sleeves, but that can't be right. I folded the edge over twice to enclose the raw edges and stitched it close to the first line of stitching so I could make a channel for elastic, which I pulled through with a safety pin. I had marked the desired length beforehand. I had wanted a bit of extra sparkle, so I added 3 seed beads to each flourish. Also, the organza was a bit stiff, so it helped weigh it down. I really like that. I tried it with a bunch more beads to add more weight, but I really did not like how it looked, so I canned that. Emmy wants to go enjoy the beautiful day again. I suppose we could go for a something ride. I was still having some wrinkling around the zipper, so I hand sewed in some boning channels. Yes, I really did sew with Emmy, but managed to add the boning without assistance. Can't forget my custom tag! Remember those holes I left in the lining earlier? Now I can stuff in the butterfly sleeves. I angled them to the side since they are not spaghetti straps. I hand stitched them to the bodice, keeping all of the stitches on the inside, and then finally finished sewing in the lining. Whoops. I'm just making it worse. Okay, so the bodice is done under that sheet, but I had one more detail I wanted to add, because as you know, Emmy's paw print is all over the skirt, embroidered and also real, but I also wanted to put Judah's paw print, and he's not here anymore to do it himself. I took the imprint that I have of his paw and traced it in Illustrator, and I'm going to cut it out with my Cricut and then stencil it onto a piece of fabric. So I can then sew it into my bodice so I have something blue and a piece of Judah with me. Perfect. The next morning it was dry and I hand stitched it right over my heart. I have to say, painting blue in the same room as my wedding dress made me very nervous, but it was worth it. This is the dress all set up, ready for the photographer, and this is my best friend and maid of honor, and Emmy's other best friend. We should put the veil on it.
Yeah.
And this is my ridiculously long veil. I'm so excited. Getting married tomorrow. And there's one more video to go on making my custom 3D veil, coming soonish.